Okay, we are live, I believe. Sorry about that, running a little late. Had a couple issues, technical issues, forgot my key, things like that. So, we are now back up and running. Such good coffee. So, I'm not really going to wait too much for people to show up. Most people are watching these on videos anyway. So what we're doing is this will be the first part of me splitting up kind of the front end versus the ADT things, right? So a lot of this code, like I'm rushing through a lot of the front end stuff and not really talking about it, and or not doing my due diligence on that end because I'm trying to get to the ADTs. So I'm going to start splitting them up into two. So this will be the first one where we're actually doing a front end. We'll still be using ADTs and stuff for some of the flows, of course, but it's not really going to focus on the data portion or the React state. It's mostly just going to be the front end. Redux state. It's mostly just going to be the front end type stuff. So without further ado, this is where we left off. Basically, we can add things, so we'll make that. We can mark things off, and we got these little filters that will filter on active and completed and all. So there's a couple problems with this accessibility-wise. Like, for instance, if I were to come down here, I would expect or want this to act like a tab control. So if I tab off of it, it would actually go to the next thing. In this case, because none of these are tab stops, we don't have them set up to be, which we'll get to eventually. We're going to work on this top part first and make this more accessible. But what we would really want is for whenever I jump into here, it selects what the active one is. And the only way I can move between them is by using the arrow keys, right? So we'll treat this entire thing as one focusable control as far as you getting to it as, with your tab buttons or by using tab. And then we'll treat it kind of like a, what are those? Like kind of a tab control, right? So that way when you're on here, you can go back and forth. And the reason why we want to implement that is, well, number one, I don't really have any motor control issues. I have no problem using a mouse. But there are people that have motor control issues. And, you want to be able to provide many ways for anybody with any, hindrance on using your application. You want to be able to provide for them. Now, I personally, my handicap is I use Vim. So because I use Vim, I really like the keyboard. So in benefiting the people that, might have motor control issues by using a pointing device, I'm also helping myself who does not have those by allowing good keyboard nav. So to do that, this control needs to change a lot. So for instance, and the other thing, the reason why we would want that sort of behavior is whenever we are, let's get out of this mode at this. Whenever, say we add the label filters and things along those lines, we might have like 30 labels and we don't want someone to tab through all 30 labels just to get to the next thing. We want it to act as a control. So that's why we're going to implement like the arrow keys and stuff like that. Now, we're probably not going to get to the arrow key implementation stuff because there's a lot of refactoring we have to do to kind of get this into its a state to where we can start, worrying about flow control with keyboards. So the React app itself is really good for showing off React, but it's not very good for showing off how to do accessible stuff. So we're going to have to get rid of some of the patterns that we've implemented around that to kind of open this up and make it a little more available. So the first thing we're going to do, and this has been bumming me out, I know that there's errors in here. So if I were to do yarn lint, notice it comes back saying done. I know for sure I have an error inside of this components here. Which one? Controls button. see, we have a lint error, but that's not showing up on our linter. So the first thing we want to do is get our linter kind of in line and get it working, so that way we have confidence on the work that we're putting in. Because right now I have no confidence on how many errors we actually have through here. That was one I just happened to find. So I guess before we start, let's create a branch off of this one, and we'll call it 0x04. I don't know if I want to do front end. Let's just see how this goes. Okay, so we'll base a branch off that. And we are doing good there. So now let's jump into here. I don't think there's any problems in here. We got our JSX. We got all that. Let's take a look here. So our script. Oh, you know what it is? Oh, goodness gracious. So we need, we are using JSX files. So we need to do that. So now if I, yarn lint. All right, cool. We do have 4 problems here. One thing I want to check though, let's see if we get 5. I don't remember if we need to specify this, but we'll just check this out. We'll do const lonely is equal to an empty string. So that's getting us an error, a lint error, of course. And here we only have 4, so it looks like we need to change this a little bit. Where's our lint? We want to do JS and JSX. And I think that'll do it for us. So we should get 5 errors here, and we got 5. Okay, so now our linter is working very, very well. And we know that it's working. So let's see about getting some, let's make sure I cleared up that 4th error, that 5th error. Yep, all good there. Okay, so there's our one with button. That's the on click is missing. So let's fix that up. So we want to go components, controls, and then button. And we need to add on click to the prop type. Okay, so let's go with a reasonable default here because I don't, so we don't have a reasonable default. So let's do on click. Because remember, we're always about reasonable defaults in JavaScript. That's how we do our type safety is, well, it's not really type safety, it's just program safety. So this will be a no-op, which will do function.prototype, and that'll get us a no-op. And here we want to do on click, and we'll jump here and make sure it's a func. All right, so now that should have cleared up. We should have 3 now. All right, we got 3 problems. Let's see, these 80, we're gonna fix those anyway. This is going on here, where is that? In filters. So we are gonna build that little builder that will actually like iterate over this and let us have a way of building these out. Right? So instead of repeating all of this stuff, we're going to dry it up with a function that'll iterate over it. So we won't deal with that one yet. Oops. So let's go to show all. That is in components to-do list. And there we go. We'll just do this to jump to it. Oh, that's all we need to do is take that out. And now we should have 2 errors. Okay, we have 2 problems. Let's make sure everything's still working. Check self, and we'll hit enter, and let's do rec self. Okay, and that still works. That works, and everything still works. So we're still good. All right. So that's awesome. So now we have that taken care of. What is the next thing? All right, so now for these 80, we want to build, where was that? That was in filters. Okay, so here's where those errors are happening or where they're occurring. So what we want to do here is actually build out a way to iterate over these, right? So what we want to do, And I guess this is a good time to talk about pair, right? So right here we have two different things. The only reason these vary right now is because of two attributes, right? We need to have this show all and we need to have the all. Like we need to have some sort of text and we need to have some sort of filter to say which filter it is. So let's come up here and we'll create a function and we'll call this build filter. Okay. And of course, this takes a filter and it takes a text. Okay. So this is pretty easy. All we need to do now is just grab one of these. We'll throw that here, go like that. And let's do some of this, a whole bunch of that, and boom. So now we have this. We can replace this with the things that we... Oops, and this is filter. Okay. And now we have this build filter. So this is going to, let's actually move this above this. So now we can actually build out a filter list and iterate over it, right? So this is a good use of pair, right? So if you think about a pair or a tuple or a product type, a lot of times I go on and on about how it parallelizes computation. Like it's a good way to do that. Another way to think of pair is a way to relate two other different things that may or may not be related. So in this case, we have two very specific strings. And we want to relate them somehow, right? So we have a pair of filter, the actual filter type, and then we have the text that goes along with that. So using product types, in this case, we only have two things that we're relating. They provide a relationship between two otherwise unrelated values. So there's no real reason for these strings to be related, except for in the context of how we're using them, right? So let's build out a filter list of those relationships, and we're going to bring in pair from crocks. And we'll just do it in a pair. We could do this with like a tuple or like a, how would you say, like an array with two values in it. But I like to use my lists, like kind of keep them the same type, right? So for this, I'm just going to use, and I mean, you could do it with the array, but we get a lot of value from using it as pair, right? We get a lot of algebras and things we could use with it. But we're just going to go with pair on this. And this is the thing about ADTs, so we might as well use the ADTs, right? So now that we have this pair, let's go ahead and we'll create a pair string. And this is basically just going to be like show all. So the filter will be here. And this will be the text for it, right? So on the left side, we have what the filter is. And on the far right side of the pair, we have what the text is that goes with that, right? Oops. So we'll do Y and then 2P. And then let's do a show active. And this is great because it gives us an ordinality too, right? Because we're putting them inside of a list or inside of an array, it's going to give us some ordinality. Like this way, all's going to come first, active will come next, and then completed. Oh, actually, it looks like completed needs to come first. All right, so yeah, this needs to be active. And we'll say active. And this needs to be completed. And we go here to completed. All right. So now we have our filter list. We have this list now of these filters. And we want to kind of fold this, or not fold this list, but we want to turn these pair of filters, or filter pairs, I guess we'll call them. Basically, filter list is a pair of string, right? And we could say that, you know, a pair of filters and whatever, but we'll just keep it with the types right now. So this is a string, and we want to turn this string into a JSX thing. So that's what this does, right? But we have a pair of things. what we really want to be able to do, oh, and we need to actually map over this list and turn these into them. So we'll use the functor portion of the list, and we'll do that by bringing in map, import, and yeah, it's just like doing a map on a normal array. Well, it is doing a map on an array. Point free. And we'll do map. It is just like doing a map on an array, or, you know, but what we're really doing is moving from an array of pairs into an array of JSX objects. So this right here is going to take, we'll say build filter. We'll get the types in here so we can kind of see what we're working with. And build filter is going to take a string, and that's going to get us back a JSX. That's it. It's basically just going to get us back this JSX here. Yeah, we have that. We have that. Okay, so now let's build ourselves, since we have this point free function, we want to be able to take this list. So we'll say build filters, right? And build filters is going to take a, oh, that's cute how it did that. Take some sort of functor. In this case, it's going to be an array. And it's going to take an array of pairs. And we want to take this pair and then apply it to this build filter function. So pair comes equipped with a function on it called, or not a function, but a method on it called merge. And what merge is going to do is it'll basically collapse the pair by applying each value of the pair to a binary or more function, right? So basically, if we have a triple function or a function that takes 3 arguments, it's going to apply the first 2 and give you back a function ready to take the second. So in that case, pair would be the context. In this case, we want to move from a pair to a JSX, right? So we can do that by using merge. Because we have this binary function. So what it's going to do is apply the left side of the pair, or the first, as this filter, which is what the filter is. And it's going to apply the right side to the text. So this will basically apply this pair to the function. It's like calling apply on a function and applying it, basically. But we can think of it as a way of merging 2 different types into one type. Because, you know, it's in the product type there. All right, so here we'll do pair and merge. This is strictly a pair function, so it comes from pair. And here we want to do merge, and we want to merge in on build filter. So now we should be able to come down here, and we can do build filters. And we want to bring in our filter list. Okay, and if there's no errors, we come here and we see that it built it, but we need to have a key. Everything still works, but it needs a key to it. So that way it knows how, React knows how to deal with it. So what we need to do now is actually set up our bit here to use a key. And we will do key. Actually, key should come after here. And key is going to be filter, because that's pretty much going to be a unique value for it. So we give it a save, and we notice that we are good there. And everything still works. We can move that to active, hit all these, and bring it back to completed. So we're still good there. Everything is good. So I guess now's a good time to kind of pause this for a second, see if anybody, we have a couple people watching. Does anyone have any questions or anything about our use of pair here? Anything like that? All right. Wait a little bit just for the stream to catch up and stuff. But if you do, go ahead and throw your comment into the chat or your question, and I'll answer them as they come in. So yeah, and feel free to always stop if you have a question or something like that. Feel free to just throw something in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to stop and answer any questions for you. Okay, So now we got the first part of this done, and if we run our linter, we see that all of our stuff has now been cleaned up. So our linter is returning just fine, everyone's happy, and things are good. Okay. So now that we got our linter all nice, what we need to do now is, there we go. What we need to do now is kind of break this filters thing, because we're going to have more filters than just this. This is basically just a status filter, so that way you can filter in on the status. And what I'm envisioning here is a group of buttons up over here to the right, where we actually have a, you know, like maybe a status filter button, a labels filter, or tags filter, something like that. And by clicking it or hitting enter on it or hitting spacebar on it, it will expose these filters that you can then iterate on and apply. So this is a exclusive filter, right? So we want to only show completed, only show active, and only show all. It's just a one-to-one, right? Whenever we build the labels, we want to make that a one-to-many. So it sounds like this filters object, we could use another layer of abstraction or another component in here that actually deals with how to deal with the behavior of the different types of filters that we have. So let's start doing that. We'll make something, a simple component called a filter section. Okay, we'll add this to controls, and it's great because as soon as we start playing with this, we're going to start to see kind of how this pattern breaks down. We have a couple nasties that are kind of hidden away right now, but as soon as we start refactoring this, they'll tend to rear their ugly little heads, and we'll have to do something about them. So here, let's go ahead and we'll create something called filter, and we'll call it filter section. So this will define a filter section for us. All right, and let's just open this up just to get some stuff in here. And because we're going to need, how would you say? Because we're going to need to deal with keyboards, and there might be state and things like that that go along with this, we're actually going to set this up to be a normal component, or not a component, but one that uses an ES6 class. And the reason why is we're probably going to want to grab refs and things like that. So we, not just refs, but we're going to want to keep track of what's active. We need to, like, if we're hitting the arrow keys and we get to the end, we need to be able to focus on the first one. Like, there's a lot of interaction that we're going to have to do with the children. And it's a lot easier to just put that into one kind of parent component and put all that there. But the problem with that is you then need to deal with state either by pushing it up into the React state or keeping it on the component. In this case, it makes sense to kind of keep it on the components, but we can always refactor later. And again, we probably won't get to the part where we're doing the keyboard nav today because we have to start, you know, how would you say, marrying this stuff together. Or how would you say, laying the foundation for all of this stuff for us to work. All this stuff to work for us. They're called words, Ian. All right, so here we'll create something that we'll call, filter, what did we call this? Filter section. All right, and this is of course going to extend component. All righty. And of course here we're going to need to export default, and we'll export default filter section. And we're going to need some sort of render function to go along with this. And here we're just going to return a simple div, which we'll call, or not which we'll call, but we'll say div class name is equal to, and we'll call this filter section. All right. Okay, and here we'll close our div out. And we want to make sure this is all working. Component. Oh, I never spelled that right. Huh. Well, we'll see how right that is. I think I'm totally misspelling it. Component. Component. That's the problem there. It's component. All right. So now we got it. Okay. So now we have component in there. We have all of that. Let's just take this filters and we're going to open this up. And let's import filter section. Because this eventually is going to hold all of our filters. So this will be our tag section, our status section, things like that. So we'll do filter section. And this is actually inside of controls. All right, so now we have that. Now we can just come downstairs here and we will, we'll just throw that in here. So we'll do filter section and put that in. So if this all works out and everything is lovely, we should see a filter section in there. And we do. So the next thing we need to do is move these buttons into this filter section. So to do that, we are going to want to move a lot of this stuff inside of here. All right. So one of the things that we will be providing from the outside is this filter list itself. So let's go ahead and let's move these functions over. So we'll take build filter. Oh, look at that. Let's actually... Okay, and then this takes an array of pairs, and we'll say pair string, and that's going to give us back a list of JSX. All right, so we want to move this stuff into pretty much here. Okay, we have some stuff that we need to move over. We need, well, filter link for one. So let's bring in filter link, and that needs to come from, oh, and see, this is where our first pattern breaks down, because filter link is an app specific thing, and now we're reaching out of our generic controls to grab an app specific thing. I don't know if we're going to be able to solve this issue. We'll try to solve that today. But I don't know if we're going to be able to solve that issue today. But there is obviously a problem here because we're in the generic controls. We shouldn't be reaching out into our app. Eventually, we're going to want to move this filter link inside of this actual controls directory. We don't want to go out like this. It shows that there's a problem with our code. All right, so now we need to pretty much take this build filters here, and we'll just drop that in here, and we see that we're going to need our filter list. So let's go ahead and we'll do const, and we'll just call this filters. And the filters are going to be equal to this dot props. All right, and this should be filters. Okay, so now this is going to break us, of course. Okay, and it is broken because object or functor of the same type is required for second object on our map, and we didn't pass filters in. Okay, so this is a problem. We have two ways we can add this. We want to put in some defaults here. So we'll do, there's two ways we can do this. we can do a static get, and then we can do default prop types or default props. And we'll say that that's a function that returns what we want, right? So this is going to return an object that does filters and returns an empty array. Okay, so now this should get rid of our error, and we see that we don't have, let's actually give this a save. And then we see that our filters went away. That's because our filter section has nothing in it. So we need to get rid of that. Or we need a way to pass that in. So now if we just come on here and we can say filters, and we'll say that is filter list. Okay, and now we have our lists, and they're all hooked up and working, but that's kind of a lie. And you'll notice our CSS is a little jacked up. So that's kind of a bummer there. We will fix the CSS here in a minute. First thing I want to do, though, is we are going to go into here, and we're going to call this status filters. Because we're going to have other filters in here, we're just going to call these status filters. And we'll start doing this kind of, even though they're the only to-do filters that we have, we'll start setting up our namespaces and kind of get a feel for the fact that there are going to be other statuses, right? Okay, so there is still a problem with this. We have that. That's working great. We have our functions moved out. Let's just do a yarn lint real quick and make sure we don't have any. We do have a problem. Filters is missing in the props validation. Filters is missing in the props validation. Okay. Oh yeah, the other thing is we could set up this static to do things like that, but I don't know. I'm kind of a sucker for doing it like this. So we'll just do our default props, and we'll say that is equal to, we'll just take these filters out here, and we'll throw that there and get rid of that. Then we don't need to do all of this nonsense. So we'll also do the same thing for the prop types, because we have to get the prop types in there. And we'll do prop types, and that's going to be filters, and we'll do prop types dot array. Now we are looking for a very specific type of an array, and at the end of this, what we're going to do is build a custom validator, because we want to make sure that we're getting an array of pair of string, right? So right now we'll just check for array just to get this to pass. And here we'll just do prop types from prop types. Okay, and I think we're good there. And now we have our lint all cleaned up. All right, so we're good there. Right now, like I said, we're just using this validator, just array. We'll create our own special custom validator here in a little bit. It'll be a blast. Well, probably won't be that much fun, but it'll be all right, I guess. Okay, so now we have this all moved over into this filter section. Like I said, we're not going to worry too much about the children's and things like that. But before we move on, let's get this CSS cleaned up. There's a couple things that are bothering me about it. So here, let's go into components. And we'll open up filters over here. Okay, so filters is no longer what we're flexing in, right? I mean, it is what we're flexing in, but it's not where we want to flex. We want to actually flex in the, how would you say, the filters section. So under components, let's just jump into here. And we will go less components controls. And let's add filter section. Dot less, and here we need to go to our all, and we will bring in filter section, and actually that's all we need for this. And here on filter section, we just come in and do dot filter section. Now, this is where we want to actually do our flexing, right? So we'll do this, and inside of here, we want this link to be our link, not the link for filter. So that means we're also going to have to change our class name here. So let's jump back into here, and where we're building out this filter link, build filters. This is where we want to do filter section, replace S. Okay, so now that'll give us our filter section link, and now we see that everything is laid out just fine. One of the things that is kind of crappy about this is you notice that we are, well, there's a couple things going on here. First of all, this default, so let me right click inspect on that, or this disabled. This button disabled, the thing that turns it red, is actually on this button disabled class. We don't really want that because that's generic for a button. So let's go ahead and fix that up real quick. So if we jump into button, here's where we'll see that we're applying that red to, right? So if we look at this disabled, that's where we're applying the red. So we don't really want that. What we want is on here, we want disabled to actually have this, right? So we don't want that on the button itself. We still want the button to handle the cursor and do things like that because that's generic for a button. But this BG red and white is very specific to a link in one of these filter sections. So we want to keep that there. Now we'll notice that we still have our red, we still have that, but if we inspect this, we see, looking at our class, whoop, hold on. Let's go to the disabled. We see that it's our filter section link disabled that's actually putting that class on there, right? So normally, like for instance, we just want this to, the only thing we want it to do is override our cursor that we're hard setting here, right? That's the only thing we want to do on disabled. So now we have that moved over. The other thing you might want to notice, or the other thing you may notice, is see how we don't have much breathing room here, right? The reason why you can see this is because, let's see here. See how we can't see it on this red one? That's because of the transparency. So we need to add a little bit of breathing room here. They're butting up against each other, and our focus is totally whack. So let's go ahead while we're in here, and we're going to set a margin left, and we're just going to set that to 0.5 rem, and that'll get me 5 pixels at a normal, how would you say, font size of 16. See, now we're good. Now we have some breathing room. But this kind of throws things off, because if we were to look at here, we have this button that's applying that and pushing it over. So this isn't centered. It's actually off by 5 pixels. And we don't really want that. So what we need to do is on first child. So while we're here, we'll just come in, and first child's probably going to happen more often than that. So we'll do this and go first child. So whenever one of these links is the first child inside of a container, it's going to set its margin left to be 0. And there's probably better ways of doing this, but this works and it makes sense, I guess. So now if we look at the first child, we no longer have that margin there, but we have it for the other ones. So now everything is actually centered properly. We could have applied it to both sides, and then that way the margin here would push on the margin here and center it just fine, but we don't want to do that. No reason to do that whenever we can just, you know, get rid of the one on the first. But basically, you'll notice that this gets you the same thing. So we can just do margin left and a margin right of 0.5. And we can comment that out. And when we look at it, we still get the... now there's even more space between them. We would have to do 0.25 or something like that. But everything balances out. I don't like the whole push up against each other. It creates more problems than it's worth later on down the line. So I like to do the first child thing. Okay, so now let's make sure we're still good. Yep, we are still good. Okay, so we got the CSS fixed up. We got things like that, but we have a huge issue going on right now. And that's because this isn't very generic in regards to, the functions that we use to run, right? So right now, this only will work, and this control will only work for, if we look at filter link here, the only thing that we're setting up to do this dispatch on is this update to-do filter. Also, we're only pulling off the to-do filter here. So this is, again, this is the same breakdown that we're seeing because we're reaching out into the more like specific application thing from a generic part as a control. It's not good news. It's not good. There's obviously a problem of responsibility here, and we are looking up instead of looking down. We're going to keep it looking up right now, but we're going to just make this generic. The reason why is we have about 2 other refactors to get us to where we really need to be before we really understand where the responsibility of all of this lies. So because this will work for us, and it'll be, I don't know, not the most minimal amount of changes, but we won't make any real decisions other than what we have like on our plate right now. We're going to keep it in this way, but we're going to make this generic outside of here, or a little more generic, I should say. So we'll start with this dispatch function. So the problem here is this update to do filter. This needs to actually be something that is passed to the component. And just right here, the only thing we really need is this dispatch. But what we want to do is take filter and maybe something we'll call apply filter. So let's do apply filter. Okay. And what we want to do with apply filter is take that and filter off of own. Okay. And then we want to basically just do this. Okay. So we'll notice that we have a problem here the second that we click that. And that's because we're not passing in apply filter. So apply filter is not defined. Oops. I was going to say that's a weird error. Apply filter. Okay. So we see that apply filter is not a function. So one of the things that we need, and get ready, we're about to use ADTs. So let me take a sip of coffee. What's going on here is we want to add a little bit of safety. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this out imperatively. And the types of steps that we'll need to do to get this to work, I'm going to write it out imperatively. And then we're going to, just so we can see how it is, we're going to then move it over using maybes and some other stuff, right? Because there's 2 disjunctions that are happening here. Well, there will be a total of 2. The first thing we need to check is that apply filter is actually a function. Because we don't really own this, we don't know who this is going to be attached to, things like that. Remember, in JavaScript, we don't have type safety, but we have things called reasonable defaults. So we need to check to make sure that everything is good before we actually apply it, because we don't want strange errors or things coming up. It's a whole different mindset in JavaScript than, say, like Haskell. So what we want to do is provide a little bit of safety here, and we'll do isFunction, and we'll check to see if apply filter is a function. Okay? And if it is a function, then we want to do this. We want to dispatch it, applying filter to it, whatever the actual filter thing that we want to apply is. We want to take that filter, apply it to it, and then dispatch it. So the first thing we need to do is function. Okay, and this comes from predicates from crocks. Okay, so now we want to see if this works. So what we're expecting to happen here is that when we go to run it, it should not run our code. It should never call that because apply filter is not a function, right? Okay, we'll just do that. And we see that exactly that happened. That's perfect. Okay, so now that we know that we're covered there, let's go ahead and we will jump into filter section. Let me open this in a new tab. Okay, just so we can kind of see what's going on here. We're going to be jumping back and forth between these. All right, so we need to be able to apply, how would you say? We basically want to get this apply to do filter inside of here. So again, if you look, we're in this filter section. And I don't think we want it here. I think we want it, now that I think about it, in filters. And then we want to apply it to here. So let's jump into filters. And this is where we want the link. So we want to bring this in from V2. Oops. All right, so we want to bring this in here. All right. This is where we want to actually apply it, or, you know, bring it in. So, and it is filter section. So since this is being applied to filter section, doing things like that, here we want to say apply filter. And we're just going to have to go down the line with this. And here we'll do func. All right, now we have our apply filter, we have that func, and we'll see that, hopefully, oh, we're not saying is required because we're going to use a reasonable default here. Let's use a reasonable default called, or what is it, apply filter, and this, of course, is just going to be a no-op, function.prototype. Okay, and that's a reasonable default, right? Just a function, we need it to be a function. But now we're going to run into another problem. And no, we're not. Why are we not running into a problem? Because we didn't actually apply this function all the way downstairs. So what we need to do now is change this a little bit, right? So let's go ahead and bring in we'll just call this fn. And we have build filters. We want to go ahead and curry this now. So, and the reason why is we want to partially apply this fn to it. Okay. So that way, hold on, let me do a little bit of formatting here. And we need to bring curry in. And we'll bring that in from helpers and curry. All right. So now that we have curry in, what we want to do is take whatever this function is that we're going to call apply filter. And we want to just apply that to this. So we also need to curry this because we need to pass it on down the line, right? And we will just do fn, oh no, yeah, fn, and we'll do that. Actually, we could get this on one line. And now that we can partially apply that, we then apply the function to it. And now we will apply each one of those to that function. and Bob's your uncle. All right, so now that those are being applied, it still doesn't work. And why does this still not work? All right, so we have build filters, we have apply filter, we have apply filter. Okay. Well, I know why it doesn't work. But, all right, so we have build filters, which takes the curry. Oh, duh. So here we have that FN, and now here we need to do apply filter is equal to FN. Okay. So now we get another error. And that's because, and I wish I had a piece of paper here to draw something out for you. What's the best way to do this? Let's take a screenshot. No, that's not going to work. Okay, so there's two parts to this, right? Now that we actually have the result of this, now that we know, like, you know, that we're running it, doing bits like that, here, while we have this fIs function, we actually need to create some state here. And we will say action Jackson, or action. And that's going to be apply filter, and then filter. Okay, and then we need another if in here, and we need to see if this is an object, okay, because it needs to be an object for that to work. And right now, since we used a reasonable default of no op, we're getting back an undefined, which is not the object that it's expecting. So before we call this, and it's only going to take an object, and it's only going to take a pojo, actually. Or a plain old JavaScript object. So we want to use the thing that checks for that, and we'll call this to object, and we'll do this, and we'll do to object here. Okay. So now we're doing this other check. So instead of throwing an error, since this is not returning an object, we would expect it to just not work. Good. So it never calls dispatch. It never does it because our reasonable defaults are falling through. When we see that our stuff is not being dispatched, that's when us as developers notice that there's a problem and we do something about it. Let's jump over here to Redux. All right, so if we look at our actions, see we're not triggering that action anymore. And that's cool. Okay, so now this is what, also if we want to see what this looks like, we can now get rid of, like to see what this looks like while it's working. We can get rid of that. And down here, we're just going to do apply filter. Okay. And this will be apply filter is equal to update to do filter. All right. So now this will get it working and we see that everything fires, right? Everything is good there. Okay. So the first thing we need to do, well, not the first thing we need to do. What we would like to do is now I can kind of show you like where a maybe comes into play. Okay. So remember what this looks like. We're just going to comment this out so you can see what that looks like. Now up here, we're going to make a new function and we're going to call this safe dispatch. Okay. Now safe dispatch is going to be a function that takes a dispatch function, dispatch, and then it also takes a, and when we write these functions, we need to think about volatility and the volatility of the actual parameters being passed to it. So then that way we can decide the order in which these arguments need to be defined to get us the most purchase whenever we're doing, you know, partial application, things along those lines. Okay, we only have about a half an hour left before I'm going to call this quits. So we got to move really quick here. All right, so now we have our dispatch function. We need to take another function, which we'll call an action function, right? And we need to take some sort of value. Okay, So now that we have that, and we're good to go, we want to set this up to capture a maybe flow. All right. So the first thing we need to do is check to see if this apply filter is an actual function. So we can do that with a function called safe, and then we just do apply filter, and we check is function. So function. So what this is doing for us, and actually we want to do action function. So what this is going to do for us is this is going to get us a function that takes, basically safe takes a predicate and then takes some sort of value and then checks that predicate against it, right? Or checks that value against the predicate. If that value passes, it gives you back a just. If it doesn't, it gives you back a nothing, which is really good for capturing nested disjunctions like this. And I'll show you why in a second here. So this comes in from maybe, and that's going to be safe. Okay. All right. So now we have this. We need to see, is this a function? So if this is a function, we need to apply our value to it. And then with that value, we want to check to see if it is an actual object, right? So where safe, if we were to think about sets, right? So if I have a set A, right, and I have a set B, okay? So what safe does is it's checking this part of the function before applying it or lifting it into something. Like say we're doing a safe lift or something like that. Safe is checking the input or the source. What we want to do is apply this function, but put the maybe on this end of it, on the actual target, right? So you can think of a maybe as providing inclusion. So for instance, say we have the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4 of all the numbers that are available, right? And anything that's outside of that subset. So if we were to say that, A or B is a subset of A, right? So anything that's still part of A, but outside of the subset of B, we can use the predicate to determine membership for this set. And that's what we're doing here. We're checking to see, well, sort of. I mean, we're checking, this is in all the world. But we're checking to see that what's coming into our function, B to A or B to C or whatever, we're checking to make sure that it matches and is part of this set. And this set could be everything. It's a little different because we're checking all different types. But we want to move it to the other end, and we want to check to see, okay, after a mapping, does it actually map the way that we would expect it to? So we have another function that just recently got added called safe after. And what safe after does is it will apply, it takes a predicate and then a function, applies a value to that function, and then checks after it's run to see if it matches, right? So this comes in here, and we'll do safe after, okay? And then give that a save. Oh no, what version are we on? Hold on, stand by. So that's the problem there. Okay, so what we want to do is let's do yarn update crocks upgrade. All right, yarn upgrade crocks. All right, now this should upgrade us to 9.3. Stand by. I think this change went in 9.1, and because we're using the... All right, good. So we're updated. Let's just make sure... Yep, it updated the yarn lock file, so perfect. All right. Okay, so now we can just do yarn start here and give that a second to cook. And now we should have perfect. So now we have that function. So what we want to do now, so we have checked this function and it's inside of a maybe. So we want to take this value and apply to it. Now you might be thinking to yourself, ooh, we can use an applicative functor here. And typically I don't really, in these cases, I don't like using an applicative functor for this. I like using an applicative functor for like bringing two things together, like merging your flows. What I would like to do is kind of lift a function from JavaScript into the maybe and run it that way. So we're going to use a thrush combinator here. All right. So we will import apply to, and this is basically your simple thrush combinator. It's going to take a value, then a function, and then apply that value to the function. No big whoop there. It's basically predicates. Nope. This is apply to is a combinator. And that's going to be apply to. All right. So what we want to do now is we have this other disjunction here. So anytime you have a nested disjunction, we basically want to check another maybe again and then combine the two maybes. So remember, anytime that we want to reapply the effect of one of these chainable types or a monad, what we want to do is chain it in. So here we'll do safe after. And what we want to check is if it's an object. So if it's an object, we want to then, if doing apply to and applying the value to it returns an object, then we want to continue on with our flow, right? So then, oh, it's combinators. So sorry about that. Okay. So now we're good. All right. So then what we want to do is we know that we're safe and everything is fine. We want to map our dispatch. Okay, so one of the things you'll notice is this is all one big side effect. This whole thing is so side effecty. Like right now, we don't care what dispatch returns. Dispatch is going to return undefined. Now, we could throw this into an IO. This is a perfect candidate for it, but we're in the front end code and this is all side effecty anyway. So by adding an IO here and then having to run it and things like that, may or may not be worth it, you know? So we're not going to deal with that extra complexity. If we start running into problems with this, we can then wrap it in an IO. But really, because of where this lives, we're not really going to run into a lot of problems with this. All right. So now we have this safe dispatch. What's going to happen here is it's going to be, it captures the first part safe, captures this disjunction, and it checks to see if the action function is a filter, or is a function, sorry. And then instead of creating this state, we're good because we can just use the container of the maybe because it's a functor. We can change the type however we want if it's a just. If this fails, though, if this is not a function, then what's going to happen is it's never going to run this and it's never going to run this. But if we're a function, we're then going to do this safe after, which is going to run this function. It's going to apply this value to this function. And if the result of that application is an object, then it's going to run onto this. If it's not, it's going to switch it to a nothing and it'll never run dispatch. So we'll never see that error. Now we can just come down here and instead of doing all of that, we can do safe dispatch and we'll pass in our dispatch function. And then we'll pass in our apply filter and then we'll pass in the filter. And then Bob's your uncle. And that's all that is. That's us using a maybe to capture this. So while it's, and the thing with this is because this returns a maybe, this is actually chainable. Like we can compose this with other flows. So if, for instance, I mean, if we didn't have this dispatch here, we could have just this check-in and then do the dispatch afterwards. So for instance, since we know that this is going to be that, what we can do now is then do map dispatch, right? It gives us more options here, and this will also work. Same sort of thing. So then that way we get our safe dispatch. Then we could change this function to be something else. We can say safe object or something. Safe object map. Safe object function. I don't know. But we'll just keep it in dispatch. So this, even though we're not really utilizing it so much right here, this gives us a bit more flexibility of what we can do with these, like when they're values. But here, I don't know. It's fine. We can just do the map. And again, we can change it. And it's very easy to change if we need to. It's just a matter of taking that out and then using this to apply it. We could make this point free and all that, but there's really no reason to, because we would have to do all kinds of weird adjustment on these. It's a lot easier to just work with this flow. And really what we should do here, I don't know what we should do here. So since this is a side effecting function, we're going to have it return nothing. Okay. Since it is a side effect, there's no reason for us to return anything at all. So we're just going to run it like that. And this will then be a function that takes a dispatch function. So we're just going to do func, an A and then a B. And we're going to give back a, what are we going to give back? Tell you what we're going to give back. We're going to give back a nothing. So unit. And then that's going to signal to us that, hey, you know what? Maybe this is a side effect function. And if we want the last value that we put in there, we could tap this or do something along those lines to return that value back. Or we could have it do this and return the B. And then here just do dot map constant B value. But we're not going to do any of that. Well, return back the maybe a value. We're just going to signal that it is a, how would you say, a side effecty function. They're kind of gross, but this is JavaScript, right? It happens. Okay, so now this is what we have with our map dispatch here, and we're already seeing all kinds of issues with this. So one of the things I don't like about this is we have all these crocks functions, we have all of this, and the safe dispatch could be something that is generic. So let's go ahead and make this a generic thing. So here in data, we have this helpers. Eventually, like next week or next time we do this, we're going to kind of adjust this helpers. So let's give just to start off and get us a nice set of helpers for the overall application. Here, let's make a helpers.js file. All right. Now, helpers.js, we're going to want that to actually take all of these crocks bits. Well, first let's just move this over because this is going to be our first helper. Let's just move this over and we'll see what we can do. This will be an export const safe dispatch. And here we can pretty much take all of this and move it over here. All right. So now we just do import. And what are we going to import here? We're going to say safe dispatch. And notice we no longer have any crocks references here, which is good. We don't want any of them really here. I'll get into the reasons later, like why we don't want that. Okay, so here we have our safe dispatch, and we're going to take that from helpers. Okay, so now that should be good, but of course it's not. We need to do this. All right. So now we have that. We see that it is not a function. And that is because we didn't save this. All right, so now we're all good. That's a function. Okay, before we go on, the next thing we need to deal with is this state to do filter. But let's do a little thing with the helpers real quick. So let's just do an awk for crocks inside of source components. We'll deal source.js components. Okay, so we see that to-do list brings something in, filter brings something in, and everything else is in this filter selection. So we want to move all of this stuff out and actually remove all of the links to crocks. It makes it a lot easier to set up specs and things like that if they're all in one place that has our references. Soon we're going to bring some lenses in, and to do that we're going to bring in Ramda, and we're going to use some other helper functions from Ramda. But if we have one helpers function that deals with our little helpers from Ramda and crocks, we can put everything in there and then worry about which library we are using inside of one helpers function. File, I should say. All right, so let's look at this first one. We have this components to-do list. Components to-do list. All right, so here we're bringing in prop equals. So let's go ahead and bring prop equals in from over here. And then here we'll just do import prop equals. And we will bring that in from helpers. Okay, so now this of course isn't going to be a function, so it's going to throw a cute little error because we now need to export it. So here, if we do that, we get the error because it's not a function. So now we need to export, and we'll do prop equals. All right, so now we don't have another reference. This will load, and then we're still good. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone is happy. Okay, so now we won't have any other place that references crocks, at least in here. We'll have everything inside of this helper functions and then export the individual helpers that we need from here. All right, so now we need to deal with filters. So let's open up filters here, and here's filters. We bring in pair, so what we want to do is jump over here, and we'll bring in pair from here, and then we want to export pair. Okay, so there we have pair exported, and then here we want to import, let's do pair from, oops, and we'll grab that from helpers. All right, so now we should be good there. We have all of our filters working. Everything is still super duper good. All right, and what is the next one? Okay, so now it's filter section. It's the thing that we've been working on this whole time. All right, so let's go into filter section, and we see that we need these. So let's take these, and we will move them here. Curry goes here, map goes here, and merge goes here. And we need to export curry and map and merge. Alrighty. And over here, we need to just bring those in. And we will import that from curry, map, and merge. And that comes in from helpers. All right, so now we can get rid of all of this. And everything should still work. All right, module not found, can't resolve helpers. That's because we are in a control. We need to go ... All right. Okay. So now if we look, we should not have anything inside there. So all of our crocks references has now been moved to helpers. So we need to do the same thing. We won't do it now, but we'll need to do the same thing for data and just make sure that all of these references to crocks reference through the helpers and data, which pulls from this helpers here. But we'll do that next week when we're doing the state stuff for all this. Okay, so now that we have all of our helpers moved over, we have all of that, we now need to, what is the thing we need to do? Let's look at filter link. All right. Components, and we'll look at filter link here. Now what we need to do is fix up this to-do filter. Oh, by the way, I guess we should also make sure that, yeah, let's make sure that all of our stuff is working. So not here, but in filters, let's go ahead and get rid of this apply filter. Okay, and we should get it, see? So our maybe is still working. And on filter section, basically it's still going to work. It'll check to make sure that the first thing is a function. If it's not a function, then it's going to apply the object and all that. You guys can play with that on your own. But it does work, I promise. Okay, so now what we want to do is, what would be better than this? And actually, hold on, I need to let this cat out really quick. Just takes 1 second. Let me mute this. So sorry about that. There is nothing worse than a cat that just won't make up its mind. All right, so what we want to do for now, again, there's a big problem here, and we're not going to deal with it yet. We're going to wait until we have some other ones, and it's ownership or responsibility, right? There's a responsibility problem here. But for now, to get around it, we're just going to populate some things. So one of the things we're going to look for, so we can keep kind of the interaction the way that it is we're going to take this, let's see here, we'll do own, and we'll call this filter label. We'll call this filter state. All right. And what we want to do is pass something in that says filter state, right? So this way, if like right now we're using to-do filter, like that's what we use in our action. What we want to do is to be able to pass maybe a labels filter or something like that as the actual thing that determines what the state is, that it's whether or not it's active or not, the selected state. Later on, if we want to take this off Redux, we can just pass this in as a normal attribute, which is probably what we're going to do anyway, and put the connection on the actual filter section part, because that makes more sense, to be honest with you. And then let that do the deciding. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes whenever we go to do that refactor. But right now, we need to add this filter state thing. So if we go here to filter section, we need to pass in something called filter state. So that'll come in here, and let's call this filter state. Okay. And here we'll do filter state. And I'm not really too concerned with the name because eventually it's going to go away. But then we'll pass that down. We're going to, of course, have a problem here because we need to pass in the filter state here as well. All right, so now that we have two attributes here, let's do this, and we will do filter state. And we want that to be like this. And we'll do filter state. Okay. So now we have our filter state. We have that. We now need to apply this down. Okay. So now that should work. But what we want to do, so how are we getting that? So for filter section, we also need to bring in filter state here. Oh, this is horrible, but it's all right. We'll deal with it. Again, this is just the manifestation of a whole other problem. All these are just symptoms of a bigger problem here. That's what this is really pointing to. All right, so now with build filters, we now have the apply filter, we have the filters, and let's do the filter state. All right, and that will be applied to that. All right, now for filter state, we'll come over here and do filter state, and this needs to be a string, so we will give it a nice empty, and here we'll do filter state. And this will be a string. Okay. So now we have that, we have that, we have that. Now you should see that nothing is being selected, even though we're still sending it, but because we are not passing in what the actual filter state is, or like which one to read from, it's coming back as undefined because undefined of undefined is undefined. So what we need to now do is where we're building this out, and that is inside of filters. We now just do filter state, and filter state is going to be a string of to do filter, I believe. All right, and there we go. Now we're back. So again, this is a symptom of a much bigger problem that we will address. But a lot of the stuff that we did in here, it just gets us working. So once we don't have to spend all this time working on an architecture or an abstraction that we're probably just going to get rid of anyway. So we're just working with what we have. Let's see if it still works. Boom, and active is still works. Yep. So everything is still good. We're still all good there. Okay, so this is pretty much this part. We now have something in a control, and we have a way to kind of make it generic, although there is that huge problem of responsibility we'll have to deal with. But in a way, we could set up any of these however we want. We get the filtering to work, and we hook up the bits. The actual action that applies the filter, the actual filter value itself, and which one to respond to as far as being active. So even though it's not in the most desirable of states, we still have it to where it is working. And we could actually ship this, right? Like, even though it's not desirable, it's something that is shippable at this point for the current requirements that we have. Although it's not ideal. Okay, so the one thing that we want to check, or one of the things we want to do, is before we go, we will set up, now that we have this helpers file, let's set up a function that will allow us to, how much time do we have? Okay, this is pretty good, I guess. Let's see if I can do this in about 6 minutes. So what we want to do is use a custom prop type. Okay, so let's jump into here, and where helpers is, let's create something called prop types.js. Okay, and these are going to be our custom prop type validations, right? So let's go ahead, and you can set up these functions, right? So we're going to set up another function because we want this of, but we kind of want it to work with both. We don't want to have a function for of and another function for something else. So what we can do is, if we see how it has that prop full name, well, let's go ahead and we'll just copy this out. Or let's create a function called const, and we'll say custom validation, or something like that. We're not going to export this or anything like that, right? So what we want is for this to be a function that takes a validator, validator, whatever. That's how we spell it now. And then we want to, really we want this here. We want this signature, but we're going to change it just a little bit. Just a wee bit here. So let's call this prop name. Okay. Component name, key, and we'll just call this value. Okay. All right. So now we have this function here. What we want to do is, if it passes our validation. So one of the things you'll notice is, the neat thing with this is the prop name and key are in the same position. The value is in the same position as this prop value. So we can pretty much just use this in both cases, and the only thing we need to check is if this prop full name exists, right? So, or what we're calling prop name. So let's go ahead and just copy this out. Nah, I don't want to copy that out. Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, let's just do it this way. All right, so what we want to do is check to see if this validator, this Boolean, runs against our value with the key. And we want to do negation on that. So if that's not true, we want to return. What do we want to return? We basically just want to return this. Okay. All right. So we want to return this new error, and this will be prop name, except it's not prop name, because if we're using this as an OR, we want it a little bit different. So let's go ahead and bring in another helper here. We'll do this, and we'll go helpers, and let's bring in default2. And what default2 will do is basically check to see default2. It's basically going to check to see if something is null, undefined, or nan. And if it is, it's going to apply the first value. Otherwise, it's going to give the value back to you. So we'll do default2. And we'll export that ever so cleverly. And here we'll just do import default2 from helpers. And where is this? This is here. Okay, so now we have our custom validation, or we have that. So here we can do that. And what we want to do is default2. And we will pick key, otherwise prop name, or we will return key. All right. Default2, and we will return key if prop name is not a thing. So now we can use this in different, like before how they had this set up as two different functions, one to work on an of and one to work by itself. We can now get this to work with both of them. And now we have this custom validation. So the next thing we want to do is, something is off here. Is it? What is that? What is going on there? So if that, here's the problem. There we go. Okay. So now what we want to do is we will do export const, and we want this to be a string, or we want to check to see if this is a pair of strings, right? So what we're going to do, we'll just call this, we'll make a function called pair of. And pair of is going in, we don't want to export that. What pair of is going to do is take something for the left, a type for the left, and a type for the right. Okay. And we want to check both of those. So let's go ahead and use a pred data type. So we have this pred data type that will wrap a predicate. And we need to come into here. And let's go into helpers here. Okay, so we need to bring in pred from crocks pred, and we need to export pred. And that's starting to get a little long. So let's do one of these and put that like that. Okay, so now that will export pred for us. And here we have our pred. And what we want to do is check is same type, which is also a crocks function. And we want to see that it's a type of pair. So we're going to have to bring pair in as well. We'll give that a save. And we have pair already exported. We need is same type though. So let's bring in is same type. Okay, and this is same type. And we want to, of course, export that. Oh, this is wrong. Okay, and this will be is same type. All right, and here we'll bring in is same type. All right, so now we have is same type. We want to check to see if that's a pred. All right, so the reason why we're using a pred is we can create a conjunction here very easily just by going concat, meow. We do concat, and what we want to do is then check is same type left, and we want to do is same type right. Okay. Yeah. Yep, that's what we want to do. But there's a problem here. This is going to get a pair to it. So we're not really checking the type to pair, but that's okay because what we can do, the reason why we're using this, is it's a contravariant functor. So we can do contra map. And for here, we're just going to contra map the first. And here we will contra map the second. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the pair, it's going to run it against here. If it's a pair, it's then going to run it against this one, but it's going to run the contra map first on it and pull the first value out and check to see if it matches the type on our left. And then down here, it's going to do the same thing and check for the type on the right. But we need to bring in FST and SND. So we'll go here and do FST. And here we need to bring in SND, which are the projections for the pair. We need to actually bring those in here. So here we'll do import SND from crocks pair SND. And we want to do the same thing for FST, but we'll do that up here and pair FST. And of course, we need to export those. All right, so here we'll do, nope. At the end here, we'll do SND. And back here, up here, we'll do FST. All right, so now we have all of those. Now we don't really want to export this because this isn't the type. So what we're going to do is export. And we will export string pair. And that's going to be equal to, and we'll do a pair of. Oh, the other thing we need to do is we're not set up to work with predicates or with pred, the data type. So we need to extract the underlying function from it. So that'll give us back the function that brings the pred. So now we can apply it. Okay. So now we can just do pair of string string, passing in those types. And we do const, and that's going to get us back our function that will now check to see each one of those is a type. All right, so our validator, this now needs to actually be custom because we want this to do that. Let's go up here and put that there. And this will make more sense in this file to do it this way. Okay, and then we go to the end of this and delete that. Okay, so now we have this string pair, which will actually do our custom prop validation for us. And let's see this in action. We just need to come here and where was that? Was that in filters? It's in filter section. Okay, so if we jump here into filter section, we'll see where we have that array. So now we can change this to array of, and we called this what, string pair. And now we just need to bring in string pair, so we'll do import string pair from prop types. Okay, and hopefully there's no errors here. Yeah, of course there's an error. So we don't have, wait, is same type, contra map is not a function. Oh, you know why? Because we need to actually lift this. Sorry. So we want to do this, and then we'll do pred. And here we'll do. And what happens if we do that? Oh, wasn't what I thought, but whatever. Okay. So there we go. I needed to lift the preds. My bad. Okay, so now we see that we're not getting any prod errors, but what happens if we change this to integer? Okay. Or number, sorry. So you see that it fails our validation because we were looking for a integer, but really we got back a string. So now we have a custom bit that actually puts in our little thing, invalid prop filter 0 applied to that filter section, validation failed. We could put something else in there, like expected or things like that, but this will work for now. Okay. So now we pretty much got everything we need to start really drilling down on this. I hope this was kind of fun and informative. The big elephant in the room is we have a big problem here that we are going to need to address sooner rather than later with the responsibility of that state. So that's all I have for this evening. let's see what our work looks like. Okay, so that's not that bad. We did a lot of bits here. Yeah, we got our ESLint fixed up. We got all kinds of things. We have this neat little safe dispatch function that's going to make our dispatching safer. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Let's do a quick little lint. Just to make sure that we're still good. And we're good. All right. Is there any questions or anything? Oh, Blake Golar. Really good stuff. Oh, awesome. Thanks. Oh, I think I know that feller. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I have. I'm going to go have some dinner and hang out with the kids a bit before bedtime. And yeah, thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.